Daniel Garcia Miller was born in 1989 in a small brick house on the outskirts of Kansas City, the only child of a part-time school teacher and a factory hand. His parents could never give him wealth, but they gave him something rarer: an allergy to debt and a belief that you measured a man not by what he earned, but by what he saved. By the time he turned 17, Daniel could repair a carburetor blindfolded and quote the price of diesel to the cent. He wanted to be an engineer, but one look at the tuition fees was enough to convince him otherwise. A clever man, his father used to say, knows when not to spend. So, Daniel became a mechanic, and that decision, seemingly small, almost timid, would one day make him a fortune. The shop where Daniel worked repaired agricultural machinery, like tractors, balers, seeders, and the odd combine harvester that had outlived its owner. The business belonged to Michael Harrison, a wiry 70-year-old who had seen Kansas through drought and flood. Most of the mechanics were content to do their hours and go home. Daniel wasn't. He kept track of parts inventory, watched for waste, and once caught a supplier overcharging them by a margin wide enough to save Michael's company for another quarter. "Why do you bother?" a coworker once asked. Daniel shrugged. "Because someone should." When a bad harvest season hit and farmers couldn't pay their bills, the shop nearly folded. One evening, Daniel knocked on Michael's office door. "I've been thinking, why don't you cut my pay for a while? It'll help us get through this." Michael blinked. "Are you sure?" Daniel shrugged and said, "Patience pays." Michael Harrison never forgot Daniel's offer. Within months, the seasonal troubles passed, the company recovered, and Daniel's salary quietly returned, although it was slightly larger than before. Daniel had no vices, unless you counted curiosity as a sin. He devoured every scrap of information that he came upon, whether it was about machinery, markets, or money. While his coworkers bragged about their new trucks, he learned about dividends, treasury bonds, and the strange new world of cryptocurrencies. At first, he thought crypto was lunacy. Meme coins soared and crashed like 4th of July skyrockets. He tried his hand, lost small sums, learned large lessons, and eventually decided that the game was rigged. "If you don't know who the fool is," he muttered to himself, "it's probably you." Then he discovered Ripple, a San Francisco company that was building something different. At first, Daniel pictured it as a bridging service for banks to transfer money across borders. The Securities and Exchange Commission had sued Ripple, accusing it of selling unregistered securities. The case dragged on for years, crushing the price of its token, called XRP, to 25 cents. Daniel gathered everything he could find about this business. Ripple wasn't running from regulation. It was asking for it. That, Daniel thought, isn't what a scammer does. He began buying small amounts of XRP each month. Not gambling, but investing patiently. One Wednesday morning, Michael Harrison didn't appear at the workshop. He usually arrived first and turned on all the lights. By noon, Daniel grew uneasy. Michael wasn't picking up his phone. Daniel drove to the old man's house. He found Michael lying face down in his garden. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly pronounced him dead. It looked like a heart attack. The funeral was a small affair, just a couple of neighbors and some of his staff. Daniel returned to work the next day, keeping the business running until things were sorted, he told the staff. 2 months later, he received a call from a Kansas City law firm. "Mr. Miller," the lawyer said, "you're mentioned in Mr. Harrison's will. Would you be able to attend the reading?" Daniel expected a small gift, perhaps a keepsake like a watch. Instead, he found himself alone in the legal firm's conference room as the lawyer read aloud from a document. "To my friend and protege, Daniel Garcia Miller, I leave the entirety of Harrison Agricultural Repairs, LLC. He deserves it, more than anyone I know." Daniel sat motionless. The lawyer said, "He clearly thought of you as his son." The lawyer smiled and added, "He also insisted you pay yourself a set percentage of the profits, not a fixed salary. He said you'd understand why." Daniel did. It would force him to be responsible, prudent, but not to shortchange himself. Above all, Michael wanted Daniel to remain patient. Daniel had met Ashley Porter at the county fair in Salina, Kansas. She was the daughter of a cattle farmer. She had freckles across her nose and a laugh that made men feel kinder than they usually were. She loved the fact that Daniel was steady, not flashy. Daniel loved the fact that she didn't ask for more than he could give. They married the next spring and had 2 children in quick succession. Ashley wanted a larger house. Daniel wanted a larger savings account. "We'll extend the kitchen next year," he promised. "I won't hold my breath," she said. He smiled and said, "Patience pays." Ashley rolled her eyes, but she stayed patient as her husband had required. What she didn't know was that every month, Daniel bought more XRP. He never hid his habit, but he didn't broadcast it either. Explaining crypto to someone who did not understand its complexities and its potential was truly a waste of time. When she eventually discovered the size of his digital portfolio, she panicked. "Daniel, this is gambling." "No," he said gently. "It's arithmetic. If I'm wrong, we lose a little. But if I'm right," he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Ashley knew what his raised eyebrows meant. By the time he turned 36, Daniel owned 3 more repair shops across Kansas, Illinois, and Iowa. His reputation was gold-plated. He was honest, reliable, and, occasionally, mechanically, miraculous. When rival shops collapsed under debt, Daniel quietly stepped in to buy their assets for pennies on the dollar. Then, he hired their best staff. His employees liked him because he was fair. His clients respected him because he was skeptical. If a farmer complained that he had trouble starting an old tractor and he thought he may have to buy another, Daniel would ask, "Does it run rough when you idle it?" "It's probably the diesel filter. It'll take about half an hour to fix it." Daniel's foreman once said, "Do you trust what anyone says?" Daniel grinned. "I trust results." At night, after his children were asleep, Daniel followed Ripple's legal case with the Securities Commission, like a lawyer reading court transcripts. He scrutinized media interviews with Ripple's CEO Brad Garlinghouse and with David Schwartz, its chief technology officer. They didn't sound like dreamers. They sounded like engineers. Daniel felt that he understood how they thought. Daniel subscribed to those YouTube podcasters who began focusing more closely on Ripple and XRP. Over time, he decided that some were charlatans, some were stragglers. But a few experts, like Zach Rector, dissected Ripple's and XRP's progress with a precision that the mainstream media clearly lacked. One evening, watching a live stream in his dim-lit home office, Daniel heard Brad Garlinghouse mention that Ripple's escrow account would continue releasing 1 million XRP every month to maintain liquidity and stability in its global payment network. Daniel thought, "This is not a toy." He doubled down, buying more XRP, along with some XLM and HBAR, which he deemed were all serious cryptos. XRP was deemed not to be a security, which, in turn, made large financial institutions more comfortable using the XRP Ledger and its native cryptocurrency. Then came the political earthquake, the Trump administration's second term. In short order, a new Securities Commission chair was appointed. Within a few weeks, the Ripple lawsuit was moving toward settlement. Daniel didn't celebrate. He waited, feeling more confident every day. Months passed, then a year or two. The market responded slowly, then suddenly. Since Daniel first bought XRP, it had climbed from 25 cents to $2, then 50, then 200. By the time it crossed $837, Daniel's portfolio was worth more than $40 million. Against his better judgment, Daniel sold a modest portion, bought a grand house in Mission Hills, and took Ashley to see it. She stared at the marble staircase and the beautiful grounds. The kids would love it. "How did you do this?" He smiled and said, "Patience pays." Ashley kissed him on the cheek. "I've learned from the best." By the time Daniel turned 45, the financial world had transformed. Governments and banks used the XRP Ledger to settle cross-border payments in seconds at extremely low cost. Central banks issued digital currencies backed by Ripple's network. XRP became the invisible backbone of global finance. It was as essential as the internet. The XRP price stabilized at around $10,240. Daniel's holdings were now worth $500 million. He felt calm, not jubilant, just satisfied, like a man who'd seen a long bet mature. He diversified into real estate, philanthropy, and even small-town scholarships in Michael Harrison's name. Every Thanksgiving, he told his children the same story about the man who taught him that patience didn't involve waiting for luck. It was all about working steadily until luck noticed. One spring morning, FedEx delivered a letter. Inside the envelope was a polite but formal message from the Treasury Department thanking Mr. Daniel G. Miller for his participation in the development of America's financial infrastructure and requesting his signature on the enclosed Liquidity Provider Compliance Agreement. Puzzled, Daniel called his lawyer. He was smiling when he said, "Do they think I run Ripple?" 3 days later, 2 men in dark suits appeared at his front door. The taller of the two showed Daniel a badge on which was an image of balancing scales, a key, and 13 stars. He said, "Mr. Miller, we need to discuss your digital asset holdings." The conversation lasted just half an hour. When it ended, Daniel felt a chill run through his bones. XRP had become too important. It was a global reserve asset. Under new legislation that Congress had passed, any individual holding more than 0.001% of XRP currently in circulation would be required to exchange their holdings for government bonds. Their XRP were to be immediately converted to 10-year U.S. Treasuries. When Daniel said that this was a forced buyback, the official from the Treasury Department nodded but did not say a word. Daniel called his lawyer, realizing that he should have immediately brought him into the conversation with his unwelcome visitors. He told his lawyer that it seemed like the government was capping the level of XRP owned by private citizens. His lawyer replied, "Not exactly. They're nationalizing it and trying to do it quietly. They'll have a media strategy ready if people like you start to complain." Within weeks, Daniel's wallets were frozen pending conversion. He would be handsomely compensated, of course, at the current market rate. But the future gains, the compounding fortune he'd envisioned for his children, would belong to the government. When the final arrangements were complete, the government wired him $480 million. That evening, Ashley found Daniel sitting on a swing chair on the front veranda, staring at the sunset. "They didn't take it all, did they?" she asked. "No way," he said, smiling faintly. "Just the part I didn't need." She sat beside him. "Are you angry?" He shook his head. "No, I was paid fairly. I was lucky." After a pause, she asked, "So, does patience still pay?" He chuckled softly. "Always. Just not always to you." 5 years later, Daniel opened a vocational school in Kansas City, which was called the Michael Harrison Institute of Applied Mechanics. Its motto, carved in bronze above the entrance, read, "Patience pays." The first student to graduate was a boy named Michael Porter Miller, Daniel's son. That evening, Daniel handed the young man a modest envelope. Inside was a note and a small digital wallet containing precisely one XRP, which was now the most valuable single token in the world. On the note, Daniel had written, "You can sell this tomorrow and buy a car, or hold it and buy your freedom. Remember, Michael, patience pays."